Former President Donald Trump has invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination while being deposed today by lawyers from the New York Attorney General's office.
That's right. The deposition is part of the office's civil investigation into the Trump Organization's finances. The former president announced his decision to not answer any questions during the deposition earlier today. He maintained his innocence and condemned the investigation as a, quote, politically motivated witch hunt targeting his family, company, and others. The former president also rallied against New York Attorney General Letitia James. He called her a, quote, failed politician whose investigation is a disgrace to the legal system. Her office launched the probe in January after announcing it obtained, quote, significant evidence the Trump Organization used false or misleading asset valuations to obtain benefits.
Joining us now for more on this is CBS News legal contributor Rebecca Roiphe. Hi there, Rebecca. So why do you think former President Trump pleaded the Fifth today?
I think his lawyers scared him into pleading the Fifth. It was the right thing to do. He's facing multiple criminal investigations into his conduct in regards to the same thing that the Attorney General is looking into, as well as other things. And it is hard to control or know whether you might say something that could incriminate you. So, I think it was probably at the insistence of his lawyers that he did so. And you can see, though, that, of course, there are costs. And one of those costs is a political cost. And in his statement, when he said, sort of addressed the fact that in the past he'd said only guilty people plead the Fifth, what he's trying to do is diffuse one of those costs, which is making him look bad, making him look guilty, and making him look like a hypocrite, so that he's trying to address that in his statement right there.
Right, Rebecca. And now back to, the investigation at this point, now that he is invoking the Fifth. What actions can the New York Attorney General's office pursue next?
So another one of the costs of pleading the Fifth is that in a civil case, the jury can do what's called drawing a negative inference from the fact that the former president has invoked his Fifth Amendment rights. And what that means is that the judge will instruct the jury, if the Attorney General brings a civil case against him, the judge will instruct the jury, look, you can infer that what he was going to say, the answers he was going to give to the Attorney General would have been incriminating, that they would have made it look more likely that he, in fact, did do what she alleges. And so that's another significant cost that he has to incur by invoking his Fifth Amendment rights here.
So separately, on a separate track, earlier this week, federal agents executed a search warrant at Mar-a-Lago, the former president's primary residence in Florida. What, if any, impact could that have on the New York Attorney General's investigation as a whole?
That's an interesting question. As far as we know, what the FBI is looking into is quite different from what the Attorney General is looking into. The Attorney General is looking into the conduct of his business before he became president, and allegations that he might have manipulated the value of his assets in order to gain certain advantages with regulators. That's different from what we know, or at least suspect, that the Department of Justice is looking into, which is, potentially interfering with the election and with the work of Congress and potentially obstructing justice, or, in this particular instance, hiding national security documents or illegally taking national security documents. So we don't exactly know what the Department of Justice is investigating, but it is not the same thing. So it seems to me unlikely that what the feds would have uncovered would be helpful to the Attorney General for that reason. But I suppose if they did happen upon something while they were there that's useful to the Attorney General, they could give that to her and help in her investigation.
All right. Well, Rebecca Roiphe, thank you so much for your legal insight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.